Magandang hapon, gabi o umaga po. Depende kung saan kayo nakatira. Hayaan niyo munang magbigay respeto ako sa mga naunang tao dito sa bansang Australia. Sa diwa ng pagkakasundo, kinikilala ng Australians for Philippine Human Rights Network ang mga tradisyonal na may-ari ng mga lupain, himpapawid at katubigan sa buong Australia. Nagbibigay kami ng paggalang sa kanilang mga nakatatanda, sa mga nakalipas at kasalukuyan, at pinaabot namin ang paggalang na ito sa lahat ng mga Aboriginal at Torres Strait Islanders sa ngayon. Kami po ay nagpupugay sa nagpapatuloy na pinakamatandang kultura sa buong mundo. Okay. Ako po si Melba Marginson. Ako po ang lead convener ng APHRN, Australians for Philippine Human Rights Network, at naninirahan din dito sa Melbourne. Ang kwento-kwentuhan ay ginaganap namin tuwing linggo o kaya ikalawang linggo, depende sa kung merong mga mahalagang issue, no? Na kailangan talakayin. At sa tuwing alas 7 ng gabi. Ngayon po ay may napakaganda po tayong topic, no? At inibitahan natin ang isang dating nandito sa Melbourne, nakasama namin noong panahon ng aming kampanya sa Yes Referendum, at siya po ay nasa Pilipinas na at nagtatrabaho sa House of Reps, no? So ngayong gabi po inibitahan namin si JT Valiente. Yan, ipapakita na ni Gabi. Ayan.
Hello po, magandang hapon po, magandang gabi po sa mga kasama po natin sa Melbourne at sa buong Australia po.
Kapita-pita gana ng itsura mo JT.
Salamat po, tita.
Okay. Siya po ang ating resource speaker ngayong gabi. At siyempre kasama ko rin sa panel ang isa pang kapita-pita ganang academic naman, no? Sa Canberra, but at the same time, siya po ay miyembro ng Canberra Pinoy Advocacy Group. Tama ba yon, Jayson? So, ayan, si Jayson ay nandyan na.
Tama, tama yan, Melba. In short, sipag.
Sipag, yeah, sipag. Parang yung Tagalog din natin ng sipag, ano? Sipag, hard work. Yeah. So, okay. Ngayon ay ang topic natin, nakita nyo, can we end political dynasties, no? Napakabigat na topic yan dahil alam nyo, ilang beses ko nang narinig, araw-araw yan kapag nakakapanood ako ng mga vlog. Napakahirap mong mahalin Pilipinas. So, ang daming mga Pilipino na yan ang sinasabi sa ngayon. Kaya kailangan po nating itakil itong issue na ito na nagpapahirap sa bansang Pilipinas. So, bibigyan po natin si JT ng siguro mga 10 minuto para ay paliwanag niya ng gusto itong issue ng political dynasties. No? Okay. The stage is yours, JT.
Thank you to you both. In 1987, fresh from the shadows of dictatorship, the Philippines made a promise to itself. A promise written into the 1987 Constitution. Article 2, Section 26 reads, "The state shall guarantee equal access to opportunities for public service and prohibit political dynasties as may be defined by law." It was a bold declaration of the time that leadership would no longer be inherited and that public office would no longer be the exclusive privilege of the powerful few. And yet, nearly 40 years later, that promise remains unfulfilled. There is still no enabling law. The corridors of power remain dominated by the same surnames, a closed circuit of influence where power passes not through performance but through bloodline. Today, I want to talk about 3 attempts in Congress to finally break the cycle: House Bills 209, 4784, and 2131. And why the real political battle isn't over whether we should ban dynasties, but who counts as family. Because as it turns out, the devil is really in the details. So, to understand why this issue cuts so deep, we turn to the research of economist and former dean of the Ateneo School of Government, Dr. Ronald Mendoza. His work gives us the language to diagnose what's really happening and to name the disease. Dr. Mendoza classifies political dynasties into two kinds, and I think we have the visual for that. So, thin dynasties are the traditional ones. Relatives succeeding each other one after another, or sunod-sunod. Father to son, husband to wife, governor to son-in-law. But fat dynasties, these are the ones that dominate today. Multiple family members holding elected positions at the same time, or sabay-sabay. A congressman here, a governor there, a mayor and vice mayor in the same city, an entire province mapped out like a family tree. In his landmark 2013 study entitled Political Dynasties and Poverty, Resolving the Chicken or Egg Situation, Dr. Mendoza and his fellow researchers found that poverty entrenches dynasties. In provinces where poverty is severe, dynastic concentration is strongest, not necessarily because dynasties make people poor, but because poverty drives people to rely on a political patron for security, aid, and access to government. Education and local media, they found, had little power to actually break this cycle. And because of this phenomenon, the language has also evolved. And I think we have the other uh, definitions there in the publication material. The next one, the other one. Yes, this one. So this is from the office of Senator Risa Ontiveros in her interpellation with the COMELEC. We found that it's not only just thin or fat dynasties anymore, meron na ding pong obese dynasties. So ang thin dynasties ay magkakamag-anak ang nagpapalitan sa isang pwesto, habang ang fat dynasties ay may dalawa o tatlo na miyembro ng isang pamilya ang sabay na nanunungkulan, habang ang obese naman ay higit 4 o 5 na kapamilya ang magkakasabay sa politika. And the data is staggering. Between 2007 and 2016, the share of governors belonging to dynasties jumped from 70% to 81%. By 2025, nearly 80% of all provincial governors are now members of fat dynasties. That's according to the Philippine, the PCIJ. I think that's the Center for Investigative Journalism. As Mendoza warns, fat dynasties compromise political competition, block new leaders, and destroy democratic checks and balances. So, for more of the figures, 87% or 71 out of 82 provincial governors are members of political families. 8 out of 10 district representatives belong to dynastic clans. 53% of mayors now come from political dynasties. At least 18 obese dynasties secured multiple seats in the last election. About 800 out of 18,000 contested positions, that's about 4.5%, had unopposed candidates from powerful families. Even the Senate remains dominated by dynastic figures, with several family tandems either retaining or reclaiming seats. So this dynastic prevalence is not just a statistical pattern, it's a social trap. It's strongly linked to poverty and underdevelopment, especially in the country's 10 poorest provinces. And beyond the economic toll, dynasties undermine democracy itself. They weaken checks and balances, stifle competition, and entrench personality based politics, eroding our democratic foundations over time. So, what is the link between dynasties and poverty? Well, research consistently shows us that provinces dominated by dynasties are less likely to experience good governance, whether in infrastructure, health, education, or poverty reduction. These provinces have lower human development, weaker institutions, and slower growth. According to Mendoza et al., this relationship is cyclical. Poverty sustains dynasties, and dynasties sustain poverty. Poorer provinces tend to have larger, more entrenched clans. This is what they call fact dynasties. The study also shows that increased poverty leads to stronger dynastic concentration, while education and media only weakly offset this trend. In short, political families thrive in environments where people remain dependent on patrons or padrinos for survival, reinforcing the very inequalities that keep them in power. So, it's really this chicken or egg problem. Does poverty cause dynasties, or do dynasties cause poverty? His conclusion is quite sobering. Poverty sustains dynasties, and dynasties deepen poverty intentionally. A vicious cycle, especially in areas outside Metro Manila, where a handful of families can control everything from budgets to barangays. So, where does the reform begin? Right now, there are three bills. Actually, there's about 8 bills in Congress and 3 bills in the Senate, which are trying to answer the same question, but defining dynasty differently. The progressive model, or the bill filed by Makabayan Representatives Antonio Tino, Rene Co, and Sarah Jane Elago, um, represent the more ambitious approach. These bills are nearly identical, and they define a dynasty as a family that holds or passes public office simultaneously or successively. In short, a monopoly on representation. And here's the key feature. They prohibit relatives within the fourth degree of consanguinity or affinity from running at the same time or immediately succeeding one another. I think we have the visual for that, so our viewers know what the degrees of consanguinity or affinity are. And at the fourth degree, that covers not just siblings, but also parents and even first cousins. This is a bold approach designed to dismantle entire political networks and end the cycle of inherited power. But there is another school of thought, also known as the targeted model. The other bill, filed by Representative Laila de Lima, takes a narrower and arguably more pragmatic path. It limits the ban to the second degree of consanguinity or affinity. That means it only applies to immediate family, parents, children, siblings, and maybe their spouses. But what it lacks in scope it makes up for precision. The House bill bans immediate succession, meaning a family member cannot directly replace another in office. It also extends the ban nationwide, and it forbids simultaneous candidacies, forcing families to choose one candidate per election cycle. This version, I'd say, is a bit more detailed, more enforceable, and politically realistic, but it stops short of addressing the broader clan system that fuels the dynastic entrenchment. So, with this, we look at the definition. This is where the battle lines are drawn, because the difference between the second and the fourth degree may seem small on paper, but in practice, it's actually the difference between banning a politician's sibling and banning their cousin. It's a difference between cutting the branch or uprooting the tree, and that's the paradox. A narrow law may finally pass, but it risks being too weak to change anything. A stronger law could truly democratize politics, but it may never survive the legislative gauntlet, precisely because those voting on it are also members of political dynasties themselves. So what kind of democracy do we want? One that complies with the Constitution in letter, or one that fulfills it in spirit? The Constitution is clear, and I'm going to end with this. Public office is a public trust, not a family heirloom. The evidence is overwhelming. Dynasties weaken democracy, they deepen poverty, and they deny opportunity. The promise of the 1987 Constitution remains unfinished, but it is not unachievable. Passing an anti-dynasty law isn't just about blocking a surname, it's also about leveling the playing field so that leadership is earned through merit, not inherited by birth. It's about making space for the next generation of Filipinos, those with ideas, not pedigrees. The choice before Congress is not whether to define dynasties, it is whether to defend democracy. And the future of that democracy, our democracy, depends on which definition they choose. Maraming salamat po.
Ayan.
Okay.
Thanks so much, JT. Mukhang marami tayong pag-uusapan mula dun sa iyong input.
Opo.
Inilagay ko yung sabi mo nga 13 out of 340 legislators
Yes,
pala.
tita. Yes po.
Ang
So as of the moment, in both houses of Congress, there are about 340, maybe 342 actually, members of the legislature. 24 in the Senate, and then 318 now in the House. Dumagdag pa po ng dalawa because the Duterte Youth Party list was nullified, and then they what do you call this? They proclaim the latter ones at the end of the political race. So there's now about 342 sitting legislators. And out of those 342, only 13 filed an anti-dynasty bill. We're about 4 months into the 20th Congress. So there's still a lot of time for our other legislators to do that, but hopefully we can pressure them to do so and to think about doing so.
JT, ito yung binigay mong listahan eh.
Opo.
Ito pa lang ang mga senador na nag-fill.
Yes po.
Tapos, ilan lang sila? 4?
Apat pa lang po.
Apat na senador, no?
Tapos
Yes
ito
po.
naman yung mga congress people.
Yes po.
So sa mga congressman, yung tatlo dyan, yung Makabayan Block, right?
Yes po.
Na ang sabi mo, ang kanilang version ng kanilang ng anti-dynasty bill ang pinaka-expansive in definition, no? Up to
Yes
the fourth degree of consanguinity or affinity. Samantalang yung kina Laila de Lima, Ramon Rodrigo Gutierrez, tama ba?
Yes po.
Edgar Erice, Mark
Wala.
Anthony Santos, Rachel Delmar, sino pa nandyan?
At saka yung Elago,
Mark.
Sarah.
Makabayan yan eh. Oo.
Yung Elago?
So
okay.
yung hindi makabayan na mga congresspersons led by Leila de Lima, most prominent probably among them, and Erice, no? Ang kanilang version, you said ay ang definition nila ng dynasty ay ang relation nila up to the second degree of consanguinity or affinity, no? So in other words, kung babalik natin yung visual, no? Hanggang asawa, so kung consanguinity, kadugo, no? Anak, no? Anak o magulang. Yun yung first degree, no? Second
Yes,
degree ay lolo-lola o kaya kapatid, no? Yun yung second degree, no? Hanggang ganun lang, no? So yung immediate family, no? Kung affinity naman through marriage, no? Yung asawa, yun yung first degree. Tapos second degree, yung parent-in-law o kaya yung daughter or son-in-law. Okay. So very immediate family member lang, no?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Inulit ko lang para mas maintindihan ng mga nakikinig, no? So, sinabi mo naman din, JT, na ano yung maaring dahilan, no, kung bakit yung isang version mas expansive yung definition kesa sa isang version, no?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say na yung version ni De Lima is sort of like a compromise?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's really more of a more pragmatic approach to pushing for this kind of legislation, because remember, 13 out of 342, and as we saw from the earlier statistics, around 50% of those who are currently members in Congress are members of political dynasties, and a big chunk of that 50% are currently in the House leadership. And that's the same case in the Senate. You know, the Senate president belongs to a political dynasty. According to Ronald Mendoza, I think they would belong to a fat dynasty. And then the House of Representatives speaker belongs to an obese dynasty. So when you look at trying to get this bill forward and pushing it through that entire legislative mill, um, it can be a bit challenging to push for up to the fourth degree. I think even up to the second degree, mahihirapan na po ang ating mga champions for anti-political dynasty bills. But I guess that was the thought process behind lowering the level of consanguinity to the second degree.
Pero alam mo,
Tapos sa Senate, sorry Margie, just so clear lahat ng facts natin. Sa
Opo.
Senate, meron bang yung version nila ng bill, lahat yon puro second degree lang.
So far po, yeah.
Walang counterparty makabayan version
To my
sa Senate.
knowledge, parang wala pa po.
Okay.
Kasi sa totoo lang, Jayson, hindi pa talaga, although medyo maingay-ingay na from a few quarters, hindi pa talaga na-embrace ng tao yung konsepto ng dynasty eh. Kaya kailangan ng malawakang hindi ba, pag-uusap pa para maintindihan at para ma-push yung mga legislators to come up with the best version. Hindi yung compromised na katulad ng ginawa nila De Lima, no?
Kasi ang tanong ng KK natin ay, can we end political dynasties? So the short answer seems to be, judging from yung mga bills sa Senate at saka sa House, if we're relying on our legislators to pass an anti-political dynasty law, then probably the answer is we cannot end political dynasties. No? The number one reason is there's so little support for bills like this, right? Any version, right? As you said, 13 no? Out
Yes.
of 340 legislators support some version of the anti-dynasty law.
That's right.
And then meron pang meron pang yung version pa na tinitingnan na parang more pragmatic is not very promising, no? Even assuming that version somehow gets more support from fellow legislators, yung definition ng ng dynasty doon ay napakakipot naman, di ba?
Yeah.
And when you think about that entire process, when you look at the gatekeepers of power in our political system, the four most powerful people are the president, the vice president, the speaker of the house, and the senate president. And a bill has to go through three of the four for it to become a law. And in all of those positions, you have members of political dynasties. So for a bill to get passed, it has to go through the entire Congress, has to take a vote 3 times before it goes to the president. And at any time, the president can also veto that measure and completely nullify that bill. So
wouldn't you say therefore that it's probably better to explore other ways to enact a law, right? Other than to go through Congress, right? Kasi there's another way, right? The people can directly enact the law, right? Through people's initiative.
Right.
Tama ba? Yeah.
That is definitely an option that our kababayans can avail. The only challenge to that is you need signatures of about 3% from every barangay in the entire country. And if only one barangay falls short of meeting that target of 3%, then the bill fails and it doesn't become law. So I believe I'm of the position that we should use all possible approaches to pushing this kind of measure forward, whether that's engaging and organizing and starting to think about how we can get this done through people's initiative, but also calling up our district representatives, calling up our party list representatives and telling them, hey, it's time to pass this or else we won't vote for you in the next election, It's time to start using our pressure, our pressure as as a
True.
society, and reminding our lawmakers that we hold the power. We hold the power to vote them into office. So that's something that they have to start thinking about.
Well, tingnan mo yung question ngayon from Kurt Abalos. Should
Yeah.
a bill become a law, who becomes the starting point and how are they chosen?
So this is also talked about in some of the bills. The family should decide within themselves who they will field as candidates, but there is also a clause for quo warranto, which essentially has gives our courts the power to essentially nullify a candidate who has already won on this basis of being a member of a political dynasty. If, for example, we have, let's say, incumbents who are members of political dynasties, and then this law comes into effect, then either one of them can a member of the public can file a case against the entire family, and the court will adjudicate who will be the one to retain their power, or the family will decide amongst themselves. But as I've seen in my experience in Congress, with some measures, they may not be retroactive. So, for example, they could pass an anti-dynasty law and then write it into the law that it shall only come into effect in the next Congress. So after the next election. That's also a possibility. Since these are just the raw bills, and they haven't gone through committee hearings, they haven't gone through technical working groups. In this current form, the initial will take into effect. So the courts can adjudicate. People can sue the families, or the families can decide within themselves who will resign and who will stay in power.
Hmm.
Yeah, meron akong ano, okay. So, dahil napakakonti pa ng mga legislators who are supporting yung any version of the anti-dynasty bill. Parang ang challenge therefore ay how to get this issue na na pinupush ng tao, 'di ba? So ang oo, tapos ang isang avenue na pwede nating gamitin ay i-connect natin yung issue ng dynasty sa corruption, no? Kasi yun yung medyo kailangan pa natin sigurong pwede pa natin pag-usapan, no? Kasi so halimbawa si JT nung inintroduce niya yung concept ng dynasty, nagre-refer siya sa sinulat ni Mendoza na connected yung dynasty sa underdevelopment, no? And in fact, sa poverty, right?
Yes.
Ang hindi natin na-connect directly yung corruption, no? I'm sure they're all connected, right? Because poverty is also related to corruption, right? So
Yeah.
I'm sure if we make people like Mendoza rewrite their study to incorporate corruption, no, dun sa mechanism how poverty is perpetrated, no, by politicians who hold on to power, corruption surely will figure there, no. So yeah, so
Ito
my
nga
question
ano,
is not my question
ah,
is not really what is the connection, kundi do you think if people talk more about the connection between dynasties and corruption, then there will be more support for an anti-dynasty bill or people's initiative for an anti-dynasty law.
oo. Well, tama ka dyan dahil ito nga may question si Rani, mukhang kino-connect na niya eh. First of all, nagpasalamat siya. Salamat JT for a very educational exposition of political dynasties. Dynasties thrive in poor areas due to patronage politics. Should TUPAD, AICS, ano nga yun? Ba't hindi yata kumpleto yung ano Tama ba? And
Yes.
those reinforcing politics, patronage politics be scrapped.
Mm.
Hmm.
I think both Sir Jason and Rani in the comments raised really good points. Um, First with Sir Jason's question, when we look at the current context, we have protests every Friday building up to November 30, and we're still discussing actually the 2025 General Appropriations Act and how corrupt that budget was, with the myriad of flood control programs, the scandals that we saw that came out of the hearings. Um, I think we raised really good questions about if this is the right time to push for this certain reform, And I think now is the best time, among any time else before, to call for our legislators to push this kind of bill, because connecting it now to um, the handout programs such as AIX-TUPAD, MAIP, etc. Um, you guys live in Australia, you have Medicare, right? And this is your universal healthcare card, and basically everything is paid for through the taxes that you pay every year, or through your consumption taxes. So covered na po yun, and it's institutionalized. Whereas here in the Philippines, if I want my healthcare to be covered, aside from PhilHealth, because we know how inefficient they are, na-institutionalize na po ang MAIP, or ang guarantee letter approach, which is essentially we are now giving government a budget to course through our legislators, um, through a guarantee letter system specifically for healthcare. So if I get sick, lalapit po ako sa aking district legislator, hihingi po ako ng guarantee letter, at yun po ang gagamitin ko pangbayad sa ospital. And so instead of me going to the DOH or PhilHealth for that matter, I am now indebted to my district representative kasi sila po yung sumagot ng aking mga bills sa ospital. And so going back to what Sir Jayson was saying earlier, which is when we look at political dynasties and the connection to corruption, we have to look at the budget process. Even if you look at it from the level of of a local government unit, or the LGU, if ang mayor mo and ang vice mayor mo ay parehong corrupt, and let's say they belong to the same family, ang mayor ang magpo-propose ng budget for the next fiscal year. Ang vice mayor ay ang chair ng sanggunian, which is like a mini version of Congress, right? So their councilors will approve the budget. It'll go through the vice mayor, who will approve the budget, and that budget, will be utilized by the mayor, who is also, let's say, a member of that same family. So the conflicts of interest are so blatant. Nakikita po natin na in practice, they will insert their own pork barrel projects, have it passed by the vice mayor, who is also part of their family, let's say, and nobody complains because they're the ones who run the entire show. And this only elevates into a national scale when, let's say, you have a district representative who's also within the same family as the head of state, as a member of the Senate, and you're all colluding together to get your pork barrel through. So that is the unfortunate reality, and I think that is the greatest link to corruption. We see it every year. Yung mga mabuting daan, diba, they destroy it, they refill it with a new set of concrete or asphalt, kahit na hindi naman kailangan. With the flood controls, they're putting up flood controls in areas that actually block waterways, so nagkakabaha. There are so many different examples that we can cite today, but I think the problem of dynasties is that it removes the checks and balances within the democracy, because you're not going to go against the interest of your family, right? And as Filipinos, we are very familial that is part of our culture. So, what makes us double check what the mayor is pushing or what the congressman is pushing, even if we know na medyo alanganin to or may corruption, we're not gonna speak out because that could be my dad, that could be my mom, that could be my cousin, that could be my brother, you know. So that is the problem with dynasties and their entrenchment of government. We really block the checks and balances of our democracy, and it's a slippery slope, a very slippery slope.
So JT, parang it seems hindi lang talaga issue ito ng dahil maraming mga magkakamag-anak, 'di ba? Kundi may culture talaga ng 'yun, yung utang na loob na
Yes.
entrenched na
Oh,
entrenched.
kung if
Oo,
if
ano
you
may
yeah. Sorry Melba,
okay lang
in-interrupt kita. Is
Jayson.
that alright?
Yeah, yeah.
If I can just recap what JT said and parang express it in terms of direction for the anti-corruption movement, it seems we cannot have a proper understanding of corruption and how to fight it if we if we're not fighting dynasties as well. In other words, yung anti-dynasty component ng anti-corruption movement is imperative, no? It's vital. You cannot have an anti-corruption movement which is also not anti-dynasty. That seems to be the conclusion that we should draw, no, from discussion natin so far, no. So yung point about patronage, kasi kunyari ang tanong ni Rani was, hindi ba dapat nating i-abolish yung mga dole outs, no? Which seems to have been institutionalized, no? Yung AIX, JT was talking about the guarantee letter. We cannot even begin to, end itong, mechanisms ng patronage if we don't attack the dynasties, di ba? Kasi kaya naman, di ba? So that seems to be my conclusion so far sa discussion natin. And yeah. And yeah, I don't know what
Mentionin
reaction
ko lang Jayson, yung mga nakikinig sa atin Cindy Megharajani Sajwani, Sunny Megharajani, Lolit Rafol Serrano, kaibigan ko yan. At syempre, andito rin yata si Kurt Abalos, of Evran Abanilla, who is also with APHRN. So, tuloy natin. Gusto mo mag-comment dun sa response ni sa sinabi ni Jayson, JT?
Opo, it's true. We can't look at this problem just with one angle. Kailangan po multifaceted ang ating approach to really destroying this culture of corruption. Because when you look at our history, right, it goes back to the feudalistic land-tied family patronage. Old elites owned land, and they owned people who tilled their land, and they exploited people for their own benefit. And that's still sort of what's happening today, just in a different form. And these families have perpetuated their power for hundreds of years. There are some political clans, even with unbroken holds of power in their own provinces or districts for centuries. So it's really, you can't just look at it in one way. We have to attack this from all sides, all at the same time, if we want things to change.
Yeah.
Yung pa yung
And the
issue. Sorry, Jayson.
Yeah.
Basahin ko lang kasi yung kay Rani, no? Kasi ni-raise ni Rani yung yung financing sources for re-election of politicians as another angle na baka, we may have, like what we do in Australia, di ba? I mean, hindi free flowing ang pera pag eleksyon. May mga rules hanggang saan lang, hanggang yung mga donations up to how much only, I don't know. I mean, hindi kaya pinag-iisipan sa Pilipinas, isa yan sa dahilan yung bara-barang, sky's the limit pagdating ng eleksyon. Kaya
There's actually a computation. The COMELEC has a computation for the budgets that politicians can have, and I think it's about 1.25 pesos only per voter within their constituency. So kung national election po yan, you're looking at about 114, maybe 150 million pesos. But if you're only in an LGU with, let's say, a population of 100,000, then you're only looking at a 100,000 peso budget. Pero clearly, that's not being followed. And with the advent of social media, marami kasi pwedeng itago na budget na hindi mahahalata, na hindi na kailangang ideklara sa COMELEC. And that's another part of the problem that I think COMELEC has to really look at and address. The problem is the chairman of the COMELEC is also an appointed official by the president. And again, goes back to that issue of dynasticism, because who is the president? What is his family name? Does he belong to a dynasty? The answer is yes. So there are political pressures as well within a system like ours that prohibit these kinds of reforms, unfortunately. But we do have a budget, hindi lang na-enforce.
Napaka-familiar niyan, ano? Anyway, basahin natin yung reaction ni Lolit Rafol Serrano. I agree that we should be able to connect the anti-political dynasty issue to anti-corruption issue. After all, data would probably show that many of those who are members of the political dynasties are among those who have corruption issues as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Confirmation of the obvious, no?
Yes, very, very true.
Meron din pinadaan sa aking question. She can't be participating right now, pero sabi niya, can you ask my question?
Sure.
So, ang concern niya, si Eileen ito from Canberra, ang question niya ay, so she's concerned about the strong cultural loyalties ng mga Pilipinas na sa perceived na mga kababayan nila. I guess she's referring to yung provincialism natin, na we vote for yung mga kababayan natin from the same province or from the same hometown, no? How does this interface with the anti-dynasty law?
Oh, that's a very that's another side to this multifaceted issue. We have strong regionalistic ties. Filipinos are because we were once also a fragmented archipelago, before we were unified by the Spaniards, similar to Australia's experience, where we had tribes and we had indigenous cultures all around the Philippines, scattered all around the Philippines. But because of colonial powers, we were unified for the colonial gain. However, what we did retain was that culture of regionalism and our strong ties to our own individual native languages and our own individual native cultures. So on one hand, there is a problem because when you combine that with the culture of utang na loob, the culture of dynastic politics, then you create this superstorm of pushing for candidates na kababayan nyo kahit na matagal na silang nasa poder, alam na ng tao na corrupt sila, but we have the sense of pride, the sense of feeling represented by the people who are running our own provinces. Because at the end of the day, there's no other alternative. You know, like if for example, let's take La Union for example, right? The Ortega clan has been in power for the last 125 years. Um, if somebody decided to run from their province into the national stage, um, baka sila lang yung may machinery. Baka sila lang yung may resources to do that. And as a member of that constituency, you would want somebody on the national scale pushing for national reforms for your province, because it's still a competition of resources, right? The budget is a limited one. It's not unlimited. We have scarcity of resources. So if um, if I'm a voter and I don't really have any other alternative, I would rather vote for yung kababayan ko, who I think will be able to build more hospitals, build more schools, allocate more of the budget to develop my own area if I have a business there, so that my own family can also benefit from that, you know. So it's really a multifaceted problem. It's hundreds of years of culture of conditioning from our colonial ancestors who have made our society the way that it is. But I think now people are starting to wake up. They're starting to realize what's wrong. They're starting to see that the system is not working. It hasn't been working for a long time, but all the more now people are waking up. They're smarter than they ever were before. They have access to information at the at their fingertips. So hopefully this is the time where we really get to see true, meaningful, and lasting change.
Yeah, and if I can add a comment too, Melba, no, na
Mm.
kasi yung response ng mga kabataan sa revelations, no, ng massive corruption, no, na essentially our own government is looting the public coffers, no. Dumidiretso yung budget sa mga pockets ng mga politiko natin, ng mga contractors, ng mga kasabwatan nila. Dalawa yung reaksyon ng kabataan eh. Yung isa is let's throw away everything, right? Let's have a new politics, right? In other words, let's have revolution, no? Katulad ng nangyari na nga sa Nepal at sa ibang lugar, no, na pinangunahan ng mga kabataan. The other response is yung response na ino-offer ng groups like organizers ng September 21 trillion peso march, saka yung mobilization sa Luneta, which is let's transform politics pero within the framework of the 1987 Constitution, no? So ang gusto kong sabihin dito ay it's significant na yung pagbaban ng political dynasties. This is how JT started this stuff, by the way. He said the Philippines made the promise to itself. Na it's significant that the 1987 Constitution said Congress should ban dynasties, and we still up to now, no, 40 years later, have not done so. No, we haven't operationalized this constitutional ban on dynasties. So this is an opportunity actually to say there is an unfulfilled promise within the 1987 Constitution. So there's an opportunity for people like us who say, let's try to manage change, no? And the change that we will offer is we will transform politics, and the transformation that we're looking at is a politics without dynasties, right? So I think it's an exciting proposition to make for the youth who oppose corruption at this moment, no? And at dapat isa tong key message ng anti-corruption movement na nabubuo sa ngayon. No?
Yan, nilagay ko nga, JT,
Opo.
sa bayang nangyayari to eh. No?
Mm.
Di ba, alam naman natin, no, yung mga grupo na nagko-call na talaga ng comprehensive na pagbabago, no? New
Yes.
policies, no? To the point na hindi lang natin alam paano may execute yung revolution. ang alam natin yung mga retired military ang may gusto ng RevCo, no? Revolutionary government, which is not what everyone wants, no?
Right.
And then of course, yung September 21, yung TPMM, yung trillion peso march movement, transforming politics within the framework of the Constitution. Ngayon, may comment din dito si Rapole, nag-agree siya sorry, di ba lumalabas? Ayan, show. I agree that we should be able to connect. Nag-agree siya sa discussion natin. Political dynasty issue to anti-corruption. After all, data would show that those who are... No, I think I got the wrong one. This is the one. I think the campaign, which we're talking about, would be better appreciated and understood if the proponents of anti-political dynasty are able to directly show the relationship between corruption and political dynasty. Yung ulit-ulit sinasabi nga ni Jayson, kailangan malinaw yung...
When we talk about corruption, we should always connect it to the rotten political system we have. And one of its key features is the predominance of dynasties, right? And also when we ask the question, can we end political dynasties? No? Actually, we can, right? We can. We probably cannot through Congress, no? They have, they have delayed this for 40 years, but we can try the people's initiative route. It's difficult, no? But it's not impossible, no? And even if we fail, right, in the sense of failing to get 3% in every district, surely may impact yan, no? In other ways, no? It could become, let's say, an election issue in the coming elections, no? If people are more aware about why they need an anti-dynasty bill, there's a way for them to say, etong mga politiko na laban sa anti-dynasty bill, wag natin iboto yan, no? Kasi they stand for the perpetuation of the same system that we're so fed up with, right? Whereas yung mga politiko na they're in favor of an anti-dynasty bill, maybe sila yung bigyan natin ng pansin.
Yeah.
Shout out meron pa mga regular na tayong pumapasok ng mga tao, si Danny Agoncillo, classmate ko pa yun sa UP. Si Kuya Ox Rivera, classmate yata naman to ni Gabi. This is a very nice discussion daw. Wow, thank you. And then, itong si Kurt, nagda-devil's advocate. Ayan. Playing devil's advocate, how can normal Filipinos vote away from dynasties when other choices are not guaranteed to be better? People would choose a known devil rather than unknown devil. Ano masabi natin dyan?
I recall the words of Mayor Vico Soto. And in a recent campaign, must have been 2022, sinasabi niya, and I won't quote him directly because I don't want to butcher his words, but basically yung sinasabi niya is, if you're looking at two candidates na hindi mo kilala, yung ibaboto niya is yung bago. And he prefers the new candidate over the old one because at the end of the day, they're going to bring something fresh. They're going to bring a new perspective. And that perspective can be challenged still by the constituency. So I think we have to take that risk. We don't know if they're going to be a devil or not. But I think newer is probably always going to be better than what we've already had. And it's up to us now to keep that person accountable, regardless of who they are, regardless of where they come from, when they're given a position of power. So,
Mm.
but on top of that, I think what Kurt is asking is also a reflection of another discussion that I think we also have to think about going into 2028, the next election, and it's that we have to give the people options. Hindi na pwede yung isa lang yung tumatakbo na walang kalaban. You know, democracy thrives on competition. And if we want to organize the people to create social change, we also have to organize around candidates who are willing to bring progressive politics forward, candidates who are willing to challenge the status quo, candidates who are not from political dynasties and who are actively against political dynasties. Some people call them dynasty slayers, you know. So that's also a part of the pie that we have to start thinking about. And I think that's what I'll leave our audience with from today's discussion. It's that how do we now start thinking about who we're going to be pushing to run in 2028? Because if we can't ask a Congress full of dynasties to push an anti-dynasty bill, then let's remove the dynasties from Congress. That is the way forward that I see, aside from everything else that we discussed today. So, ayun po.
Actually, patapos na tayo, no? And I really thank Kurt for having commented on that and yung response mo, JT. Kasi ang pinaka-exciting dito, yung sabi nga, we have to offer people an option. Di ba? Parang kumbaga, we're like in a bog. Pero hanggat wala tayong pinakikitang option na meron palang pwedeng iboto ang mga tao na mas mahusay, mas mga matitino kaysa sa mga nakikita nila ngayon. So usapin lang talaga yan ng machinery eh, di ba? No. Anyway, patapos na tayo kaya kailangan na tayong mag-wrap up. Okay. Jayson, anong masasabi mo?
Ako ang takeaway ko dito, we cannot have an anti-corruption movement na hindi on board sa call to end political dynasties, no? Yung we cannot transform politics if we don't get rid of political dynasties. And to me, ang kailangan nating trabahuin talaga dito ay get people involved, not only to discuss this, we need people to act on it through a people's initiative.
Yeah. Thanks, Jayson. JT, may dadagdag ka ba sa sinabi mo kanina?
Firstly, I want to say thank you lang po to our conveners, Tita Melba and Sir Jayson. Thank you for inviting me here today to share a bit of my experience working in the house and a bit of my learnings from my masteral courses that I've been taking. And I want to say thank you also to my friends and family who were also very active in today's discussion, who asked questions and who were supporting and watching this discussion. So if there's anything I want to leave you with today, it's we should try all possible avenues. We should take all possible avenues to push for the removal of dynasties and to push for the fulfillment of the 1987 Constitution, because that is the promise of EDSA. Sayang, kasi we already have something to go on with, and if we can't fully realize it, then it will have. I wish that we could fully utilize it. That's all I wanted to say. But I have hope for the Filipino people. I have hope in our country, and we have to keep holding on to our hope. The moment that we lose hope is the moment that we lose the battle. So let's keep hoping. Let's keep fighting for our nation, the soul of our nation. Let's encourage our friends, our family, especially the young ones, to stand up, to take courage, and to maybe one day challenge their dynasties and their own districts. So, ayun po. Maraming salamat po sa inyong oras.
Pwede ba ako mag-ask ng permission sa'yo?
Wow.
Pwede bang igawa ng reel yung mga sinabi mong yan?
I can try.
Ang ganda kasi, ano, from a millennial. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank
Marami
you po.
kaming I mean, we were right in inviting you to this discussion. Marami kaming napulot ni Jayson kasi for the benefit of our watchers and listeners, we are definitely going to write up yung aming campaign plan on people's initiative around corruption and dynasty and anti-dynasty. No, this is part of our ongoing understanding of the dynasties, and our next move will be on people's initiatives. But we got a lot from today. And shout out kay Rani. Maganda yung si Rani meron na naman napiling bagong term, dynasty slayers. You know, as a possible slogan for the coming campaign. Anyway, thank you so much,
Thank you po.
Jayson, JT, and your friends who watched us, and of course our technical Gabby Ocampo in the background. Meron pa bang natirang comment na hindi natin nabasa? Arnold Gallardo also listening. Okay, thank you, and good night to everyone. Panoorin niyo po yung mga susunod naming it will be more really about discussions of this time. It will be people's initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you po.
Ito, merong si Cindy. Ayan, nagsalita si Cindy. Yan. That was awesome. Thank you. End stream.